Welcome to Border Raiders, the place for your fix for all things outdoors and wild camping. So today we're going to be taking a look at what might just be, pound for pound, the best value tent on the market. So it is of course the infamous OEX Bobcat, and I say infamous because over the past couple of years it's gathered a bit of a cult following, this thing. So just for context, I've had this tent for around a year and I've used it in a variety of different conditions, from favourable summer weather to snowy and windy wet camps. So straight off the bat, let's talk about the price of this thing, because it is what makes it so appealing and one of the main reasons it has garnered such a following over the past couple of years. You can pick this tent up from anywhere in between £60 to £120, which is really impressive considering what you're getting with this tent. So before going through the setup of the tent and the exterior and interior features, I want to just talk through the basic specs. So this is a one-man 3-season tent. Now it is marketed as a 3-season tent, but there's enough evidence out there that I would without hesitation consider this within the 4-season category, and you'll find the majority of owners of this tent would agree with me. So the weight comes in at 1.9 kilogram, which I think is very respectable considering what you're getting with this tent, which is a durable 4-season. And as you can see, the pack size is also very respectable. Would note I haven't got the poles or the pegs in with this. I do like to pack them separately, so just be aware if you are packing them, it's obviously going to be a bit of a longer size, but yeah, you will find this will fit into your bag with no problem at all. Okay, so let's have a look at the bag itself. Now as you can see, it is a roll top closure system, which I always appreciate because it really does let you roll that down and get it nice and compact to fit in your bag. I would say as well, I've never had any sort of trouble in fitting this tent in. There is enough space in there to not cause you any issues. The bag also features these 4 webbing loops, which means if you don't want to pack this inside your bag, you can strap it to the outside easily. So let's talk about what comes with the tent. So first let's go through the pegs. So it does come with these pretty basic shepherd's hook style pegs. I would say they are fairly durable. Some of these shepherd's hook styles you get are really flimsy, but they do seem to be fairly strong. They will do a job for you, but I would recommend upgrading these. Tent pegs are a really inexpensive thing, an easy way to upgrade your tent. And it also of course comes with the pole. So it is of course a single pole tent. These are aluminium poles of 8.5mm. So next we're going to talk through the setup of this tent. So just want to lay our tent out roughly in the position where we want it. What I would say is if you're out in winds, I'd recommend pitching this the side into the wind. Having said that, I've pitched it plenty of times where the wind has been battered in the front and it has been absolutely fine. It is a really strong tent, but if you can, do pitch it with the sides into the wind. So this tent thankfully does connect with the inner attached to the outer. When you first buy it, they will be separate, but once it's in, it will be the only time you'd have to do it. And they all stay connected apart from these 4 corner points. So as you can see, it's just this small plastic hook, and that's going to connect to a ringlet, but the gap is just too big in it where it just falls out really easily. I think ideally they could have done with a bit of a tighter fit here to stop that from coming out, because it can get a little bit frustrating, especially if you are out in windy conditions. So yeah, if you can, I'd recommend doing this first. Just saves you from having to put your hand under when it's all pegged out, trying to find it and connect it up. It can be a little bit annoying. So if you wanted to, I have seen a few people online that have just used a bit of shock cords or bungee to tie these 2 pieces together. If you are using this tent regularly or for a long period of time, it's something I'd definitely recommend doing. So next, I'm just going to peg out these 4 main corner points. What I'd say at this point though is that you don't want to do this too tight. You do want to do it very loosely, and we can go back later on and just tighten everything up. So next, you want to just simply feed your pole through the pole sleeve. Connect the grommet on your pole to the connection point here, and then you obviously want to move around to the side and get this bit in. Now I've seen a few people complain about how tight this is. Now to be honest, I've never really had too many issues in terms of getting it in. What you can do though, there is a compression strap going through the length of the tent, so if you are finding it a little bit hard, just check the compression and you can loosen that off if you do need to. But the idea is you want to bend the pole back on itself to give you enough slack to easily pop it in. So next I'm going to peg out the remainder of these peg out points, and as you'll see, the tent will start to take shape a little bit at this point. Again, just doing that loosely, not too tight as of yet. So the only point I'd say not to peg out is this middle section on the door, because I do like to have full access, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So next we're going to do the guy lines, and there is 7 of them. Now what you can do, if you're low on pegs maybe, is you can use one peg to peg out this side point and the front point. But ideally I like to do these separate. It just means I've got a little bit more control of the angle. So what you want to do with these side guy lines is bring these out onto a bit of an angle, not too much, and this is going to do a great job in creating this opposing force on the pole, which is going to make it really, really strong. So I do want to quickly talk about the line locks on this. I really like this sort of ring feature. It's really easy to manipulate to get it to the right length and the right tension. So next we're going to do these 2 front guy lines, which as you can see connect to a bit of fabric at the front, which essentially creates a little bit of a hood over the door. And lastly, I'm going to do this back guy line. Now there is an alternative way you can pitch this, but I'll go through that in a little bit as we head inside the tent. So at this point you've got the main structure of the tent up, so now I like to just go around and tighten everything up to get the best pitch possible. One thing to be aware of when you're setting this up is to make sure that this pole is central. You know, if you tighten the front or the back a little bit too much, you can find it'll go in on a little bit of a slope. So yeah, just make sure that's set up correctly. Okay, so next let's talk about the exterior features on this tent, starting with the fabric. So the fabric on the outer is a 58D polyurethane, so it's a really robust material, and that has got a hydrostatic head of 5,000, which is great. The legal requirement is 1,500. You're typically recommended 2,000 to 3,000, so this is 5,000. You're going to have no issues with any sort of rain dropping inside this. Another benefit is that it's not going to absorb any water, for example, like a sil nylon. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the structure of this tent, because for me, it is what makes this tent so strong. It's one of its best features. It does come with a couple downfalls though, which I'll talk about as we move into the tent. But in terms of the benefits, it just makes it a ridiculously strong, robust tent, having this single pole. And a lot of the work is being done by these guy lines, as I said before, particularly these 2 side ones where you're creating this opposing force. So just as an example, if the wind was coming in at the sides, that has got plenty strength, but it's also got enough flex where it's not too rigid, where the wind can roll over it. If the wind's coming in from the back or the front, it is just ridiculously strong because of these guy lines. And I've had this pitched a couple of times, the wind into the front of the tent, and it's been absolutely fine. Another smart little feature that they've done is on the pole sleeve, they've featured this mesh, which has also got a little bit of reinforced polyurethane, but that's just another feature that lets the wind roll and not catch too much on the lip. It's just going to allow it to blow through. As you can see, the fly sheet does come all the way to the ground on this tent, which is another reason why I would consider, and many other people do consider, this to be a true 4-season tent. So before moving inside the tent, let's talk about the door, which is another really, really strong feature on this, because as you can see, the thing's massive. It is a really, really good size, and it does mean that it is accessible. If you're someone that struggles a bit with mobility issues, this tent is going to be a good pick for you. It's really easy to get down, get in the tent. So it has got a double zip, which means you can open this from either side, and there is a handy little pocket just on the inside here, which you can stuff that into. So with this being a 2-way zip, you can also open it from the top, which if you want, this can allow a little bit of extra ventilation. But one thing I love to do is when you're sitting inside, maybe the weather's a bit bad out, and you can just sit there and peer out at the conditions. Another thing you can do is just open it a little bit from the bottom, peg it out, and this can just provide a little bit of ventilation. This is great if you're cooking on the inside of the vestibule. So another thing you can do if you are in bad weather is you can peg out this middle section of the door, and that's going to allow you to just open it up halfway. For example, if the wind's coming in on this way. I can just open this up, get my gear in quick. So you will notice there is also a storm flap on this tent, and there is a section of mesh at the top for ventilation. So next, let's talk about the vestibule in this tent. It's another really strong feature. And the first thing I want to point out is that, as you can see here, there is a integrated ground sheet in the vestibule. And like I did then, if you don't want that, if you prefer it just to be the open grass, you can just tuck that underneath. That's absolutely fine. But if you want to use that, you'll need to just peg it out on these two peg points. So I absolutely love this feature in this tent. It just means you can comfortably sit in now, as I am. If you're in bad weather, you can sit in here comfortably. You can't even, at a push, it is a little bit tight, but you could even get out of your wet clothes here, so you're not taking any sort of moisture inside the tent. So I actually done a camping this last year where we were caught out in a thunderstorm, and this section was really great for that. We didn't want to set all the gear up inside the tent because we thought we might have to bug out. So I just sat here in my wet gear with the door up and peered out. So what's also great about this vestibule is the size. Now, although it hasn't got much depth, you will find there is enough room to cook inside with this. But what it lacks in depth, it really does make up for in width, as you can see by just how long this space is. And this is really great, particularly with a one-man tent where space is obviously going to be limited inside and you're going to need to store your gear elsewhere. This is great to just store your bag. I'll typically store my bag on one side, store my cooking gear, my food on the other side, and then you've got all this central section. There's plenty of room on this tent. It is a real joy to use. Another thing you can do in terms of storage is use the side that isn't being utilised by the door as a pocket that you can put a few extra little bits in. I actually quite like to keep the tent bag in here just so I know where it is and I'm not going to lose it. So let's take a look at the interior. So as you can see, it's made up mostly of this solid material, but it does have this top third which is made of mesh. Now it doesn't have any sort of option to make this solid, but if I'm honest, you wouldn't want it. With this being a one-manner, you're going to want a lot of ventilation, and it's still warm enough in the winter but allows plenty of ventilation through the summer. One thing I would like to do on this, but you haven't got the option to, is to be able to open it from the top, similar to how you can with the outer door. There's this small section of fabric which prevents the bottom zip from going any higher up, and I'm just not sure what the benefit of this is. I'm not sure why it's there. It seems like a little bit of a pointless feature. If you're adamant, I'm pretty sure you could just cut this with a pair of scissors, which I might do. So as we open this door up, you can see it does attach at the floor here. So what you can do is, as you can see, there's these two toggles. So you can simply roll that up and toggle it so it's nice and neatly packed away. What I find myself doing most of the time once my pad is in here is I'll just stuff it down the side, and that keeps it nice and tidy as well. So earlier I talked about the structure of the tent and mentioned how, although it's its main strength, there is a downfall to it, and this is what I mean. Because of the angle of the tent, this back panel naturally does brush up against you. I do have a really good mod that we're going to show you now, which helps pull out this back panel, and while it's not going to stop this brushing up against you, it is going to prevent the fly from sticking to the inner and bringing any moisture inside the tent. So now I'm going to show you the mod. So what you want to do is take out this back peg and take your guy line out, and then what you want to do is put this peg in, but instead of pulling it out as you usually would, you want to put it so it is flat, as you can see, all across the back. So as you can see, what I've done here is I brought the trekking pole pretty close to the tent, and what this has allowed me to do is give it a couple wraps, peg it out, get a good bit of tension, and as you can see, that essentially just changes the angle of the guy line. So that's just going to lift this outer away from the inner. So if we have a look at this from the inside, you might be thinking it doesn't actually look all too different. But what it has done, it has made a significant gap from the fly to the inner. As you can see, that is a massive difference. So what that's going to do is that's going to stop the outer from touching the inner and transferring any moisture onto the inner, which would then go onto my sleeping bag. So I'm really happy with that. Okay, so next let's talk about the head height of this tent. And I've found this not to be any sort of issue for me. I'm 5'8". I am sitting on the ground. If I'm using my pad, I'm obviously going to be elevated a little bit more, but I do find there is enough room for your head. Again, you are going to brush up against it a little bit. It's just something you can't avoid on this tent. It's going to happen when you're lying down as well. But there is enough head height, particularly in the centre. And as you can see, as it stands with most tents, you do have a little ringlet here, which you can hang a lantern on. Where it does fall down a little bit, depending on your height, is the length of the tent. So again, for the context, I am 5'8", and for me, it is a good size. I've got a bit of room above my head, a bit of room down below my feet. But I would say if you're touching 6 foot, over 6 foot, I think this will be a tight squeeze for you. So as we're talking about the floor space, let's take a look at the width of this tent. Now, if you're using a regular pad in here, you'll find you've got a little bit of space on either side. Not enough where I'd really say you can store anything. If you are using a wide pad, which is 25 inches, for example, I use the Big Agnes Rapide SL, it essentially fills the whole space of the floor. But I've never found this to be an issue because, as discussed earlier, you're going to store the majority of your kit in the vestibule space. While we're talking about storage, you'll find on either side, at the head end of the tent and at the foot end, you've got these pockets, which are of a reasonable size. So in summary, this tent, considering the price point and the performance it offers, is honestly incredible. It is so impressive to get something at that price, which you're going to be able to take out year round, and it's going to be able to handle strong winds. I think someone with any experience in this hobby, if you've been doing it for years or if you're new to it, will enjoy using this tent. But I do think in particular, for someone looking at getting into the hobby, who's working on a budget or doesn't want to commit too much financially to the first purchase, this is a great option. I think this really is what OEX seem to do better than any other manufacturer. They make really reliable, well-built tents at a really accessible price point. Thanks for watching. If you did get value from this video, please do consider liking, commenting and subscribing. It really does go a long way to helping the growth of the channel. We've also got plenty of wild camping videos to get stuck into. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.